Now, for more insight into the health of the auto industry amid this pandemic, let's bring in Ryan McManus. He's the CEO and founder of Share, a scheduled ride-sharing service. He joins us now from Columbus, Ohio. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
So, given the impact this virus has had on the auto industry as well as its workers, talk about the importance and the timing of the auto sector reopening now.
Well, it's extremely important that the auto sector reopens right and cautiously. They need to make sure that they match the manufacturing of new vehicles to the decreased demand. You can look a month or two back to the decreased volume of sales at the dealership, and that's going to reduce the manufacturing demand upstream. Supply chains, of course, a main issue, but I think the most important thing to think about is the workforce and making sure that it's the right thing to do for the employees, and that's going to be a location by location decision.
And so what do we know about what automakers are doing to ensure the safety of their returning workers?
Well, the first step is really thinking about the commute. So automakers are thinking about how are they going to get their workforce to the job, especially if there's reductions in public transit. Many automakers are looking at private sector options or private transit options to be able to move their workforce. They're also doing things like temperature checks, redesigning workstations, and thinking about the places where employees interact and how to make those safe spaces. It's a lot more than just masks.
And obviously, when you reopen, it's not just one location. I mean, what does this mean for the rest of the auto supply chain, some of which is going to involve parts made in overseas where manufacturing isn't up and running yet?
That could be the biggest deterrent to reopening right away if they're not going to be able to get all the parts. There were already manufacturing automakers in the United States that opened up and closed due to a lack of being able to get parts there.
So is it better then to sort of wait and see until all the supply chains are in a line, given the potential losses that might happen?
I think each company is going to have to make the decision themselves. I think it's demand is ultimately going to determine how quickly they need to reopen. Some of them, it's very symbolic to be opening right now and to show that American manufacturing can be strong again.
And so for those who aren't familiar, help us understand the impact of the COVID-19 shutdown on sales, as well as how the potential longevity of the virus may impact future sales.
Well, the automotive industry is forecasting a significant decrease in sales down to 12 or 13 million units for the entire year. Sales in April were down 40 to 50%. Most automakers are only reporting on sales now on a quarterly basis, so we're not really seeing the full impact without April and May numbers. But for some of the automakers that are reporting, it's ranging from 35 to 60% decrease in volume. And it's not just because people are not driving more. It could be because, transportation isn't top of mind. The auto industry's really banking on strong third and fourth quarter sales. I think the automakers are preparing for a shift towards more mobility services, something that was already happening, something that in other parts of the world is actually leapfrogging vehicle sales.
And I also want to look at China, the world's biggest auto market, as they start to reopen and adapt. Any lessons that any of the other auto industries can learn from how they're proceeding?
Well, I think it was interesting to see how China spurred vehicle sales through incentives. I think making sure you get the incentives right to get people buying cars that needed them, that could be a really good example. I think you can look at the hit that China had in vehicle sales in February, where it was as much as 70%. So it may not be at the peak yet as far as how vehicle sales in the United States are going to be impacted. So I think we can look at both how China kind of responded, the impact in sales, but also how they opened their manufacturers pretty quickly, and they were some of the first industries to open.
And just quickly, do you think this pandemic will lead to long-term changes in the auto sector, perhaps more reliance on things like automation at some of these plants in case of future outbreaks?
I think automation, of course, the trend was already there towards autonomy. What's automakers are thinking about now is how are you going to redesign the vehicle for a shared experience? And so if you're going to have more than one person riding together, what does that need to look like? If you're going to be getting into a ride-sharing vehicle or a micro-transit vehicle in the future, how are you going to have individual spaces? How are UV lights and things like that going to be potentially used for cleaning?
Certainly lots to look forward to. Thank you so much, Ryan McManus there, the CEO and founder of Share.